Hello and welcome to my channel. I've made some pretty significant updates to my ham radio suite, so what a great time to just make a new video. Check this out. Welcome back and thanks for being here. If you followed my YouTube channel for any amount of time, and especially if you read the articles that I publish on my website, then you know I'm a bit of a tech addict. I've been a licensed ham radio operator since 1995 and have managed to put a transceiver of one sort or another in every car I've owned ever since then. My very first ham radio was a handheld VHF transceiver. I actually used to ride with that on my bicycle. I was a bicycle commuter at the time. And then, of course, I had it set up in my Mark II Golf, and from there it moved into my Mark III Jetta. And eventually the Mark III got a dual band mobile transceiver, and then eventually an HF rig. And that car, it actually had some worldwide popularity at some point. I know that sounds boastful, but it's true. I was formerly known as StealthGTI, and was a founding member at TDIclub.com. And so I used to get email from around the world asking me questions about things that I've done to the car, electronics and whatever. When I finally retired that car and got my Mark VI Jetta TDI, I put all of that ham radio equipment into that car, and then eventually moved up to a digital transceiver by ICOM. When I sold that car back to VW, that was when I put the transceiver, the VHF, UHF transceiver into this car. My Mark III had a very elaborate antenna farm, and I decided I just wanted to keep things simple on this car. So a single antenna up on the roof, and so I only had one radio in the car for quite a while. Lately, I decided that I wanted to put the HF rig in this car, which of course makes it a little bit more elaborate. But one of the things I'd like to do here is just cram as much stuff into this car as I can and keep it hidden. That's always one of my fun goals with any car I've owned in the past 20 years, is to get it in and make it discreet and make it clean. And so I think that's what I'm about to show you here. One of my challenges with installing ham radio equipment into this car is the Mark 7s have very tight tolerances for the trim panels. And so that made it a lot harder to hide wires, and I did manage to do that. What I've chosen to do is route everything through the ventilation ducts, and it doesn't get much cleaner than that. The wires are very well hidden and discreet. If I tuck everything away and have somebody riding in the car here with me, they don't even know that there's anything in this car. In fact, I've even had a previous car broken into, and the thieves didn't even realize that they were sitting on a gold mine. There was just, everything was hidden so well that all they did was they stole my stereo. That was the thing to do back in the 2000s. I think these days they just steal the whole car. It's easier. But getting everything hidden behind the panels was my big challenge. And again, I like to conceal everything. For the radios that I've chosen, I didn't choose them for this car. I brought them with me from my previous cars. And so my primary radio that I use, I don't want to say I use it every day, but it's in the car. The antenna for it is mounted every day, is my ICOM Id-5100A. It is a VHF UHF radio with dual receivers, so I can receive two separate bands at the same time. I can even receive two different frequencies on the same band. It's a very slick radio, very cool. The display on it is very large, and so when I first went to mount it in the car, there was no discreet way to mount this thing. And so that was one of the reasons I was really glad that it came with a magnetic base plate for mounting, because then it's very easy to just remove the display and walk off with it. For me to do it. It's easy for crooks too, but I like to do it first. The radio is also a D-Star radio, and what D-Star is, it's a digital communications medium that uses the internet, so that the VHF or UHF signal is not limited to just line of sight. Now my signal can get on the internet and transmit to other parts of the world with internet assistance, of course, and that's very easy if I am within the line of sight of a repeater. There are over 700 repeaters in the United States. And since I'm often not within the line of sight of a D-Star repeater, I've managed to build what's known as a DV Mega. It's based on a Raspberry Pi, and I use this to connect to a hotspot, a mobile hotspot here in the car, and then this thing puts my transmitted signal onto the internet, and then I can talk to anybody in the world. Well, anybody else who's on D-Star. It's a pretty slick setup. I really like it. The menus on the radio are very easy to use because the display is just so huge and it's a touch screen. It's very easy to navigate and select different scanning modes. I can scan two segments of a band at the same time, 2 bands at the same time. I can monitor a frequency at the same time that I'm scanning a frequency. I can search for local repeaters. This radio is nothing short of incredible. And I'd recommend it to anybody who has it within their budget to buy one of these things. Eventually, I decided I wanted to get onto the HF bands. That is the high frequency bands. And this is the stuff that gets you around the world on skywaves. My HF rig is a Yaesu Ft-857D. It has 2 claims to fame. One of them is that it is the world's smallest HF rig. That can be both good and bad. The other is Yaesu's active tuning antenna system, the Atas-120A. And that antenna just makes HF mobile operations incredibly easy. Push button tuning, which, yes, you can get antenna tuners that are push button, but we're talking about a mobile platform here where everything is small and compact and everything is built right into the 857 to just push and tune the antenna, and then the antenna on the roof actively tunes to the frequency that I want to dial in. It's pretty slick. It's not a fantastic antenna. Everything is a compromise in a mobile environment when you're talking about HF, but it's easy to use, convenient to mount and dismount, and I can't say enough good about it. Its negative is that it is not a gain antenna. It is not going to break up any pileups, nor is it going to win any competitions, but it gets me on the air and it's convenient for me to use. And being that I do change my antennas out from time to time, it's nice to have something that's easy to fiddle with. My microphones are down here on the door. This configuration, I am going to change it. My poor Yaesu microphone has been dumped to the ground far too many times. And then the speakers are glued to the dash in a discreet fashion. My HF speaker, the glue kind of pulled over a little bit. I'm going to redo that to make it look a little better. I don't like the way that turned out, but very easy place to mount the speakers, and they're definitely functional and easy to hear. The transceiver bodies, the chassis, the brains of the whole operation, they're in the back. You probably have already seen one or both of them in previous videos, and these radios come with separation kits. The makers know that these cars are harder and harder to mount full-size transceivers inside the cab of a car. So they're designed to be mounted under seats, in the trunk, or in my case, beneath the floor of my trunk. The power supply, the voltage supply to these transceivers is regulated and stable. I just published a video. I'll put a link up here for that. Go check it out, my 12-volt distribution setup. For antennas, I have a few antennas. I usually have a little 18-inch antenna mounted to the car because it's discrete, and that limits me to VHF and UHF. And I mean, let's face it, during my daily commute, especially here in rush hour traffic, it's just so crowded, I'm not going to be scrolling through the HF bands. So my Atas-120A is more of a weekend antenna. During the week, I might listen to a commuter net. I might use D-Star. Most of the time, though, because my commute is 35 minutes, and that to me is not enough time to find a conversation, get involved, and do a roundtable. It's time consuming, right? So quite frankly, I just don't use the radio very often when I'm commuting. I do have it on in case I get a call or in case I hear somebody that I want to talk to. But for the most part, the little dual bander is mounted to the top of the car. I also have a half-wave antenna that I use. It performs better. It's great for when I have a cargo rack or my rooftop cargo box mounted, because then I can set it off to the side and get my signal out that way. It does not need a ground plane established by the roof, and so it's able to operate from the roof rack. It works great, and from what I've noticed, it's a favorite antenna among overlanders and off-roaders because it's durable and does not require a ground plane. Up from there, I've got a 6/8, I'll just call it a granddaddy VHF UHF antenna. That thing has a lot of gain. I want to say its gain is about 4.5 dBi on VHF and 7 dBi on UHF. It's a phenomenal antenna, but it's gigantic. And both that one and my half wave are kind of noisy. I never had a noise problem with those antennas on my Jetta, but it must be just the way the air travels over the roof, or maybe some turbulence at the back of the car. There's just no telling. Both of those antennas whistle or howl. The half wave whistles and the 6/8 waves kind of howls. It's very strange. So I will use those antennas if I really need them, which I very rarely do. For the most part, I just got the little 18-incher up there, and it's silent. I can't hear it at all. And then the Atas-120A, of course, I put that on if I want to work the HF bands. That antenna, it makes noise up there as well, but it doesn't howl or whistle. It just kind of has noise to it. And that's tolerable. That's no different than having a roof rack on the car. So mounting, how did I mount this thing? I didn't want to drill a hole in the roof of the car. So I decided to just use the existing shark fin antenna hole. It's a weird square-shaped hole that VW cut. Actually, I can't just say VW. These shark fin antennas are so universal that most cars these days have them. And they've got a square hole to mount those to. And obviously, I can't fit a 3/4 inch NMO mount in a 1.5 inch square hole. So I got a mount by a company, a man named Breedlove. Breedlove makes these very heavy-duty NMO mounts and various other mounts for mounting on camper shells or heavy-duty applications. And so that's what I did, is I got the Breedlove mount. It's made for mounting in a 3/4 inch hole, but because I got the larger base to it, it's able to fit over top of a 1.5 inch square. And very sturdy. I can put the Atas antenna on it with an adapter. The Atas is actually pretty heavy, and well, it's a pound, maybe a pound and a half, which is heavy when you're on top of a car moving around a little bit. The Breedlove mount is very strong and holds everything very steady. My feed line comes down through the interior of the car and goes through a diamond lightning arrestor. And then I also have, how do I get the two separate radios to talk through just one antenna? I use a duplexer by Comet. And so it automatically sends all of the HF signals to and from the HF radio, and then all the VHF and UHF signals to and from the 5100A. Those components stay hidden in the behind the interior of the car and just about forgotten about. I can access the duplexer pretty easy if I need to unplug the antenna or do some testing, but for the most part, it just sits back there completely out of sight, out of mind, and very reliable. I had it in my previous cars, never had any problems with it. So yeah, that's the duplexer. Why do I need a ham radio in my car? I don't. It's almost for recreation. Most ham radio operators are eager to lend a helping hand. And a guy with his ham radio is almost like a Boy Scout, just ready to jump into action. And what kind of action? Think about every natural or otherwise disaster that we've had in our world in any amount of modern history. The hurricane in Puerto Rico, the superstorm Sandy, the power outages up in New England, all of those just completely devastated local infrastructure. But ham radio operators, they've got their radios installed in place with battery backups and everything to be able to operate free of the grid. And so ham radio operators are the ones providing communications in and out of all of those affected areas. With this being a mobile rig, I have power and infrastructure set up to the radio. Sure, I might lose my D-Star capability because, you know, the internet might go down. Cell phone towers might go down after a bit, but the HF bands, digital has come to HF. I haven't learned how to use it yet, but I am going to set up my radio to be able to do some digital communications. You just plug in a computer. There's jacks on the back of my 857D, and I can hook up computers, and it's not the internet, but it is a network of computers connected via the ham radio waves. And that's pretty cool. Most people don't see the end of our civilization, our infrastructure. Oh, it'll never happen to me. Talk to somebody from up in New England when they lost power for however many days that was, or Superstorm Sandy, who those folks were probably out of power for a week or more. I can't remember. It was a while. Panic. There was panic up there. And there's something to be said about being prepared. So do I need it? No. But because I have it, I'm glad I have the ability to exercise it. So I use it as a hobby, but I have it to fall back on as a necessity should the need arise. And I'm glad for that. And I like putting it in my car because it's mobile and could sustain itself. Even if I just plug in an external antenna on top of the car and run a wire out to the yard and put an antenna up in a tree, I can sit out here in the car and use the radio, charge the battery via solar, whatever. I can make it happen. So there is a lot of capability packed into this car. Most people don't see it. Most people don't feel they need it. And most people wouldn't use it even if they had it. But there are those of us out here that do have it, do like it, and do appreciate having it. So that's it. That's me in a nutshell. And that is the ham radio equipment. Feel free to ask questions if you have them. Go check out the article I wrote about this setup on my website. There's a little bit more detail, I think. Definitely a lot of photographs. I flashed a lot of photographs in this video. I hope you found them helpful. As always, thanks for visiting, and I will see you next time. Take care.